Story Chapter 10. The story is about a jealous person and a jealous person. In a fairly large city, two men lived in two houses next to each other. One person hates the other so much that the hated person decides to change his place of residence, going far away because he is convinced that just living apart will avoid incurring the neighbor's hatred. Because even though he helped him with many good deeds, he still could not reduce his jealousy. So he sold the house he was living in cheaply, and with a small amount of capital he withdrew to a city in a country not too far away. He bought a small plot of land about half a mile away from the city. There was a quite comfortable house, a beautiful garden, and a large yard in which there was a dry well that had not been used for a long time. That kind man, after arriving in a new place, wore monk's robes to live a hermit's life. He also built many monastic rooms in the house and soon organized a monastic community. His virtue soon spread far and wide, attracting a large number of devotees, both civilians and city officials. Everyone respected and loved him very much. From far away, people came to ask him to pray for him, and all those who met him upon their return proclaimed the blessings they believed they had received from the Supreme Being through him as an intermediary. His fame spread back to the old city from which he had left. Those who hated him became even more sad and angry to the point of leaving their homes and jobs, determined to find a way to kill him. For that purpose, he went to a new monastery of monks whose abbot was his neighbor before. The director received him very cordially. The jealous person said that he deliberately came to inform him of something important that needed to be discussed privately. He added, "So that no one hears that private conversation, I suggest we walk together in the yard, and since it is already dark, you should send the monks to their rooms." The director did as he was told. When the jealous man saw that he was alone with this good neighbor, he began to talk from one thing to another and walked side by side in the yard, until when he was near the edge of the well, he pushed him down. Down there, no one witnessed that crime. Having finished his work, he quickly left, passed through the monastery gate without anyone seeing him, and returned home, very satisfied with the trip and certain that the object of his jealousy was no longer in this world. But he was very wrong. Scheherazade could not continue speaking because dawn had already broken. The emperor was very dissatisfied with the evil and devilish personality of the jealous Millet. "I really hope," he said to himself, "something bad has happened to that good monk. Hopefully we will see tomorrow night that heaven has not abandoned him in that case." Oh, sister, if you don't sleep." Dinarzade woke up and called out to you. "Then please tell me if that good monk is safe out of that well." "Safe, dear," Scheherazade replied, and the second Muslim monk continued his story. "That very deep ancient well," he said, "was originally the residence of the gods, just in time for them to save the abbot. They caught him and gently placed him at the bottom of the well without hurting him at all. He clearly saw that something strange had happened in that fall where he was sure he would lose his life. But he saw nothing and felt nothing. Then he suddenly heard a voice say, 'Do you know who that person we just picked up?' Many other voices replied that they did not know anyone. The first voice said, 'I will tell you clearly. This person, with the kindest heart in the world, left the city he lived in to come here with the desire to repair one of his neighbors. His neighbors were freed from the bad habit of being jealous and hating him. Here, he was respected by everyone, making the jealous person angry, unable to bear it, he immediately came here to find a way to harm him. He carried out his plan, and if it weren't for our help, he would have been harmed. His reputation is so great that the emperor, who lives in a nearby city, will come here tomorrow to visit and ask for his prayers. Pray for the princess." Another voice asked why the princess had to rely on a monk to pray for her. The first voice replied, "So you don't know that the princess is possessed by Maimun, son of Dimdim, who is in love with her and haunts her? I know very well that this kind abbot can cure her. Princess, the job is easy, I'll tell you. Luckily, in his monastery there is a black cat, with a white dot on the tip of its tail. Just pluck the 7 feathers from that white dot and burn it. And put smoke on the princess's head. Immediately she would be cured, eliminating the obsession of Mamun, Dimdim's son, and never again would this man dare to approach the princess a second time." Head of the monks, the monk heard not a single word missing in the conversation between the gods and fairies. They remained completely silent that whole night after uttering the above sentences. The next day, it was dawn when he made a clear distinction. Everything he saw was a well with many landslides. He managed to climb up without much effort. The monks who were searching for him were very happy to see him return. In a few short sentences he told them about it. The cruel plot of the guest he warmly welcomed the day before and then retreated to his own room. The black cat that he had heard mentioned last night in the conversation between the gods and fairies had come to him to be petted as always. He then plucked 7 hairs from the white dot at the end of the cat's tail and set it aside in case he needed it again. Not long after the sun had risen, the emperor, not wanting to delay at all in quickly curing the princess's illness, arrived at the monastery gate. He ordered the guards to stop there and then entered with the courtiers as needed. The monks respectfully welcomed the king. The emperor pulled the head of the monks aside and said, "Abbot, surely you understand why I came here?" "Your Majesty," the head monk replied slowly, "if I am not mistaken, the princess's illness has brought me this great honor that I really do not deserve." "That's right," said the emperor, "you will make it seem like I am resurrected if your prayers heal my daughter." "Your Majesty," said the kind man, "if you are willing to bring the princess here, I hope that with God's help and grace, the princess will be completely cured and return." The king, very happy, immediately ordered to find the princess, and soon she appeared with a large number of ladies and attendants, her face covered so that no one could see her. The abbot ordered a stove to be placed on the princess's head, and just as he put the 7 hairs he had just brought back into the embers of the stove, the monster Maimun, Dimdim's son, cried out loudly. No one saw his silhouette, running away from the princess. First, she put her hand on her veil. And lifted it up, asking, "Where am I? Who brought me here?" Hearing the princess's question, the emperor could not hide his overflowing joy, hugged his daughter and kissed her eyes. He also kissed the abbot's hand and told his courtiers, "Say it. What kind of reward is worthy of the person who cured my daughter's illness?" All the courtiers replied that that person deserved to marry the princess. "That's what I thought," said the king, "and from now on, I accept this person as my son-in-law." A short time later, the prime minister passed away. The emperor appointed an abbot to that position. Then the emperor also died without a prince to succeed him. The religious dignitaries and the army gathered and unanimously agreed to honor his son-in-law and new prime minister to succeed him as king. The morning sun forced Scheherazade to stop speaking. Shahryar saw that the abbot's position as king was worthy, but he was still confused because seeing that the jealous guy had not died from anger and sadness, he stood up and whispered that the next night would understand this matter. Dinarzade, when the time came, as usual, said to the queen like this, "Dear sister, my dear, if you don't sleep, could you please tell me the story of the jealous person and the envied person?" "Please," Scheherazade replied. Here is what the second monk continued. The kind monk, he said thus, he ascended to the throne of his father-in-law. One day, along with the whole court, he saw a jealous person walking in the crowd on the road. He called a courtier closer and said softly, "Go to that man and bring him here. Don't make him afraid." This official obeyed the order, and when that jealous man stood before the king said, "My friend, I am very happy to see you," then ordered an official count him 1,000 coins immediately. Gold coins in the royal treasury. In addition, 20 packages of rare goods from our treasury were donated and a full security team escorted him to his home. After giving the official that mission, the king said goodbye to the jealous person and continued his royal journey. When I finished telling this story to the villain who killed the princess of Ebony Island, I contacted him and said to him, "Oh God! You see, this virtuous king not only forgot that this jealous person had almost killed him, but also treated him generously as I just told him. That person." Then I used my eloquence to persuade him to follow that good example and let me go. But he still did not give up. He told me, "All I can do for you is let me you're alive, but don't be too happy that I'll leave you safe and sound. I need to show you what I can do with my magic." With that he grabbed me and flew over the roof of the underground castle, as that was wide open for him to pass, taking me high above. Looking down I could only see white clouds. From that height, he rushed down to the ground as fast as lightning, setting foot on the top of a mountain. There, he grabbed a handful of soil, brought it close to his mouth, read or rather muttered something I didn't understand, then threw it at me and shouted, "Turn, turn into a monkey." Then he disappeared, and I was left alone, a monkey, in endless pain in a strange country, not sure whether it was near or far from my father's king's kingdom. I went down the mountain and into a flat country. It took me just over a month to reach the beginning and also to reach the coast. The ocean was calm, and about half a mile away, I saw a ship. In order not to miss a rare good opportunity, I broke off a large tree branch, pulled it into the sea, and rowed on top, using both hands and 2 small branches to row. Just like that I swam to the ship. When I was close enough for everyone to recognize me, both passengers and sailors gathered on the side of the ship were extremely surprised. Everyone turned to look at me admiringly. At that moment I got close to the side of the ship and grabbed a rope and climbed onto the deck. But because I couldn't speak, I was extremely confused. However, the danger now cannot be compared to when I was still in the hands of the evil god. The merchants on the ship, who were superstitious and overly cautious, thought I would bring disaster to them if they left me on board. That's why one person said, "I will hit it with a mallet." Another person, "I want to shoot an arrow through its body." Another person, "Let's throw it into the sea." Surely someone would have done what he said if I had not hastily nestled next to the captain and knelt at his feet. I grabbed his shirt in a pleading manner, making him seem emotional, and seeing my tears flowing freely, he hugged me, protected me, caressed and threatened that anyone who intentionally harmed me would regret it. As for me, even though I can't speak, I try to make every gesture to express my gratitude. After the calm sea, the wind arose, although not strong, but lasting. For 50 days the wind blew in one direction and we peacefully arrived at a magnificent city with a large population and bustling trade. We anchor here. This city is even more important because it is the capital of a powerful country. Our flagship was quickly surrounded by countless small ships, filled with people coming to either welcome our friends back, or ask about what was interesting in the countries we had passed, or just simply curious to visit a large ship from far away. Among those people, there were several court officials who wanted to negotiate with the merchants on the ship on behalf of the king. The merchants came to present themselves and a mandarin said to them, "Our emperor has given us the task of welcoming you to the kingdom and has requested that everyone write a few words on the scroll. So that you can understand the king's meaning, I would like to add that our prime minister is an official who is both capable of running affairs and has perfect handwriting." But unfortunately he thanked me. So a few days ago, the emperor was very sad and could not forget the prime minister's handwriting. He solemnly swore that he would only give the power of prime minister to someone who could write as beautifully as the prime minister. Many people have come to offer their writing, but so far no one in this vast country has been chosen worthy of holding the position of prime minister. The merchants on the ship, those who considered themselves capable of peering into that high position, all took turns writing on the scroll what they wanted to say. When they finished writing, I approached and took the scroll in the hand of the person holding it. Everyone, especially the merchants who had just shown their handwriting, thought I wanted to tear up or throw the scroll into the sea, so they screamed, but they were reassured as soon as they saw me holding the scroll carefully and showing signs. I also want to write. From concern they turned to admiration. However, because they had never seen a monkey that could write, and did not believe that I could be more skillful than other monkeys, they wanted to snatch the scroll back from my hand. But the captain once again defended. He said, "Let him write alone. If he only knows how to smear paper, I promise to punish him immediately. If, on the contrary, he writes beautifully as I always believed in my life." I have never seen a monkey as intelligent and resourceful as well as knowledgeable about life like him. I announced that I would adopt him. I also have a son, but to be honest, he is not as smart as him. Seeing that no one objected anymore, I picked up the pen and only put it down after writing all 6 common Arabic characters. Each type of script is an improvised 2-line or 4-line poem praising the emperor. Not only does my handwriting overshadow the handwriting of all the merchants, but I can also say it is the most beautiful ever in this country. When I finished writing, the mandarins took the scroll and brought it back to the emperor. Scheherazade said that suddenly it was dawn. She said to Shahryar, "If there is still time, I will tell the king what happened." The details are even more strange than what was just told. The emperor, thinking to himself that he would have to listen to this story from beginning to end, stood up without saying anything. The next night, Dinarzade woke up before dawn calling the queen got up and said, "My sister, if you are no longer sleeping, please tell me about the monkey's fate. I think our emperor and lord would also like to hear about it as much as I do." "Our lord and I will be satisfied immediately," said Scheherazade, and to get right to the story, The second Muslim ascetic continued his story as follows. The king does not paying no attention to other handwriting but just attentively looking at my handwriting made him especially satisfied. He told the courtier, "Go into my stable, choose the most beautiful one, put on a luxurious saddle and bring out a precious brocade shirt and put it on the person with these 6 types of writing. Tell that person to come up. Horse and bring it here to me." Hearing the king's orders like that, the mandarins all burst into laughter. Angry at their audacity and arrogance, the king was just about to punish them when they quickly replied, "Please forgive us, Your Majesty. These writings are not written by a human but by a monkey." "What do you say?" The king exclaimed. "These handwritings like flying dragons and dancing phoenixes are not from the hand of a human being?" "Your Majesty, it is not from your hand," one of the officials said. "I would like to confirm to you that it is indeed from the hand of a monkey. He himself wrote it in front of us." This king found the incident so strange that he wanted to see it for himself. He told the mandarins, "Follow my orders. Bring that rare monkey here immediately." The ministers returned to the ship to deliver the king's orders to the captain. This man immediately obeyed the order. So they dressed me in a splendid brocade coat, led me to land, and placed me on a horse. The king and his large court were still waiting to welcome me at his palace. The trip begins. The port, the streets, the construction sites, the windows, the castle terraces and houses were all filled with people, young and old, men and women. From all over the city came to see me and listen. Rumors quickly spread that the king had just chosen a monkey to be his prime minister. After presenting this crowd of screaming people with a scene never seen before, I arrived at the royal palace. I saw this king sitting on his throne among the court officials. I bowed to him 3 times, and the 3rd time, I knelt down and kissed the ground in front of him. Then I sat down on the ground like a monkey would. The entire audience expressed admiration for not understanding why a monkey understood such etiquette for a king, and the emperor was even more surprised than anyone else. The audience would have been more complete if I had also been able to use my language with gestures, but monkeys can never speak, and my advantage of being a human being does not give me the benefit of the doubt. That grace. The emperor commanded the court, and only the chief eunuch, a very young slave, and me remained with him. He moved from the court palace to the harem and ordered the meal to be served. Sitting at the table, he motioned for me to come closer and asked me to sit and eat with him. To show my respect, I kissed the ground, stood up, and sat at the dining table. I eat very politely, modestly and conservatively. Before the table was cleared away, I suddenly saw a writing table. I signaled to bring it back. I took a pen and wrote verses praising the emperor on a large peach and presented it to him. He read it and was even more surprised. The table was cleared, a special drink was brought, the king gave me a cup. I drank and wrote new poems on the rim of the cup that expressed my situation at that time because I had gone through so much suffering. The emperor also read and said, "A person with this level of ability can surpass even the greatest great men." This king brought the chessboard and asked me if I knew how to play and if I wanted to play with him. I kissed the ground and placed my hand on my head to say I was willing to accept that honor. He beat me in the first game, but I won the second game and won the third game as well. Realizing that he seemed uncomfortable, I immediately improvised a quatrain poem for him to read to help him relax. In that poem, I describe two powerful armies fighting fiercely with each other all day, but in the evening they reconciled and spent the night together quietly right on the battlefield. The king was amazed by the intelligence and dexterity of a monkey, and he did not want to witness all that magic alone. He has a daughter named Dium-Kiu, a princess of heavenly beauty. He told the chief eunuch who was present there and was the princess's teacher, "You come back and bring your student here. I want him to share this joy with me." The chief eunuch obeyed and soon brought the princess. She revealed her face, but as soon as she entered the room, she quickly reached out and pulled down her veil, saying to the king, "Father, have you forgotten? I am extremely surprised that you would let me appear before a man." "What do you say?" the emperor replied. "Don't you think you were wrong? There is only one slave here, the chief eunuch who teaches his son and father. We are all free to see your face. Yet you took down your veil and blamed me for sending you here." "Your Majesty," the princess said, "then you will see that I am not mistaken." Even though the monkey had the appearance of a monkey, it was a young prince, the son of a powerful king. He was under a demon's spell, so he turned into a monkey. A fierce god, the granddaughter of the goddess Ebelise, did that to him after brutally killing the princess of Ebony Island, daughter of King Epitimeris. The emperor heard his daughter say that, "Turn towards me in surprise." Without making any more gestures, he asked me if what the princess had just said was true. Because I couldn't speak, I put my hand on my head to show that the princess was telling the truth. "My daughter," the emperor asked his son, "how did you know that this prince was turned into a monkey by love magic?" "Your Majesty," Princess Dium-Kiu said, "do you remember that when I became a young woman, there was an old woman who took care of me? That's a very good magician. She gave me 60 transformations. So, in just a blink of an eye, I can move your capital to the middle of the ocean, on the other side of the Caucasus Mountains. With that bravery, you can know all the people who are bewitched, and with just a glance, you know who they are and who they are bewitched by. So please, Father, do not be surprised that I immediately discovered the prince through his monkey disguise and was unable to present him as he really is." "My daughter," the emperor said, "I didn't expect you to be so talented." "Dear father, these are mysterious things that also need to be known, but it seems that I have bragged too much." "If so," said the emperor, "then you can also cure the prince's evil spell?" "Yes, father, I can return him to his previous appearance. Please give him back his original form. I don't know how happy you will be, because you want to make him prime minister of the court and marry me, to be your son-in-law and son-in-law of the kingdom. Father, I will obey your orders." By the time Scheherazade finished this last sentence, it was just dawn, so he had to leave the story about the second Muslim ascetic. Shahryar commented that the next paragraph might not be "it's not as interesting as the part one just heard, so I decided to listen to it again the next day." Dinariati, as usual, called the queen and said, "My sister, if you can't sleep any more, please let me know." Princess Dium-Kiu, how did the second monk return to his old form? "You will know later," Scheherazade replied. The second ascetic continued his story as follows. Princess Dium-Kiu went back to her room. He took out a sword with ancient Hebrew letters engraved on the blade. "She took us, the emperor, the chief eunuch, the little slave and me to a closed courtyard in the palace and let us stand around the courtyard, while she went to the middle of the courtyard, drew a large circle and drew it in. There are many ancient Arabic letters and other words that people call Cleopatra's letters. When she had finished preparing the circle to her satisfaction, she stopped in the middle of the circle, chanted incantations and read the Quran. The space gradually darkened, as if the machine of creation was about to go to pieces. We were extremely scared and even more panicked when we saw the evil god, Iblis's grandson, appear, in the form of a giant lion. As soon as the princess saw the monster, she shouted, "That dog! Instead of kneeling before me, you want to scare me with the guise of that hideous animal? What about you?" the lion roared. "Are you not afraid of breaking the promise we solemnly swore that no one would harm anyone?" "Ah! Damn Quan," the princess objected. "It was me. I should have asked you that, right?" "You will have to," the lion suddenly interrupted, "pay for bothering me to come here." Having finished speaking, the lion opened its mouth wide and approached the princess. As if wanting to swallow her alive, but having been on guard in advance, she jumped back and promptly pulled out a strand of hair, casting a spell to turn it into a sharp sword. And with a blow to the middle of the spine cut the lion in two. The two halves of the lion disappeared, leaving only the head, which turned into a scorpion. Immediately, the princess turned into a snake and attacked the scorpion. Seeing its weakness, the scorpion turned into an eagle and flew away. The coiled snake also turned into a bigger, stronger black eagle and flew after it. Both birds flew out of our sight. A moment later, the ground suddenly cracked in front of us and a black cat with white spots emerged, its fur standing on end and howling savagely. A black wolf also appeared and rushed at the cat. The cat quickly turned into a worm, saw a pomegranate falling next to a narrow but quite deep ditch, so he quickly drilled a hole and crawled in. The pomegranate instantly swelled to the size of a pumpkin, flew to the roof of the hallway, rolled several times, then fell to the floor and shattered. The wolf then turned into a rooster, jumped quickly to peck and eat the pomegranate seeds one after another. When it didn't see any more seeds, it ran to us, spread its wings and flapped as if asking us if there were any seeds left. There was a seed rolling on the edge of the ditch. It turned around and ran before it could peck at it. That seed rolled into the ditch and immediately turned into a small fish. "But, Your Majesty," Scheherazade said, "look at the sky. It's already morning. I can guess for sure that if the dawn hadn't yet risen, you would be very pleased to hear the next part from me." Having finished speaking, she fell silent. The emperor stood up, his mind full of thoughts. Interesting details of the story. He had a strong and extremely impatient desire to hear the rest of this amazing story. Dinarzade, the next day, without fear of interrupting the queen's sleep, told her, "Dear sister, if you can't sleep anymore, please continue the extremely interesting story that you left off yesterday, which is now changing from one thing to another." Scheherazade recalled in her mind what she had told. Then said to the emperor, "My lord, the second monk continued his story like this. The rooster jumped into the ditch and turned into a fish swimming after the small fish. We both stayed underwater for 2 hours and we all didn't understand the outcome when suddenly we heard terrible screams that made us tremble. A moment later, we saw the villain and the princess covered in fire. They released fire from their mouths to burn each other, and as the two got closer, the fire became more intense. Plumes of thick smoke and fire rose very high. We were afraid that the fire would probably burn down the entire palace, but we were startled when the villain left the princess, walked towards us and opened his mouth to spray chunks of fire at us all. If the princess hadn't come in time to chase him away, we probably wouldn't have survived. However, no matter how quickly the princess came to save him, the emperor's beard and face were burned, and the chief eunuch was suffocated and burned to ashes immediately. As for me, a spark of fire hit my right eye and left me blind. In the midst of that, we heard a loud cry, "Victory! Win!" and saw that the princess had returned to her original form, and the villain was just a pile of ash at her feet. The princess walked up to us and didn't waste any time telling the still intact little slave to get a cup of clean water. She took it, brought it close to her mouth, recited a few spells, then sprinkled it on me and said, "If you become a monkey under the spell, then change your shape and return to your original human form." As soon as she finished speaking, I returned to my original form before being bewitched, only missing one eye. I adjusted my posture to thank the princess, but she didn't give me time to do so. She turned back and said to her father the emperor, "Father, I have defeated that evil man as you saw. But victory comes at a high price. You won't be alive much longer and I won't be able to see you happily married to the prince I planned for." Fire penetrated into me during the recent fight and slowly burned my body. This disaster would not have happened if you had immediately seen the remaining pomegranate seeds to peck at like the other seeds when you turned into a rooster. The villain has entered this county as a last refuge against you. This mistake caused you to call for help from the fire that I saw you fighting between heaven and earth before me. Even though the villain's bravery was very strong, I was still stronger than him and defeated him and burned him to cinders. But I cannot avoid the approaching death. Scheherazade stopped at this point and said to the emperor, "Your Majesty, heaven has told me to stop talking. If you are still willing to let me if you live until tomorrow, you will hear me tell the end of this story." Shahryar agreed and stood up as usual to go about court business. A little before dawn, Dinarzade woke up and called for the king. The queen begged, "My dear sister, if you no longer want to sleep, please tell me the story of the second monk." Scheherazade immediately spoke and continued the story as follows. The ascetic monk continued to tell his story to Zobeide. He said to her, "Madam, the emperor quietly listened to Princess Dmku tell the story of her battle and when she finished speaking, he spoke to his daughter in a painful and emotional voice. 'My daughter, you clearly see my situation. I don't understand why I'm still alive. The chief eunuch, my teacher, is dead, and the prince I just released the spell on has lost an eye.'" He couldn't say any more because tears and sobs choked him. We were extremely moved by his sorrow, and the princess and I wept with the emperor. While everyone was extremely sad, the princess suddenly shouted, "I'm on fire! I'm on fire!" She felt the smoldering fire inside her flare up all over her body, making her cry out incessantly, "I'm on fire!" and death finally ended her unbearable pain. The fire was so strange, in just a moment her whole body was just a pile of ashes like an old villain. Madam, I cannot express how moved I was by that scene. I would rather spend the rest of my life as a monkey or a dog than to see my benefactor die so miserably. As for the emperor, he was in unimaginable pain. He cried out pitifully and punched his head and chest with his fist until he collapsed in frustration and fainted, making me worry that he might ascend to the galaxy. Hearing the emperor's cries and cries, the eunuchs and mandarins came and spent a lot of effort to revive him. The emperor and I did not have to spend much time explaining to them our heartache. The 2 piles of ashes belonging to the princess and the old villain let them know everything that happened. The emperor no longer had the strength to stand up and had to rely on the eunuchs to return to the harem. When rumors of that extremely tragic event spread throughout the royal palace and the capital, all subjects mourned for Princess Diem Kiyu's misfortune and sympathized with the king's sadness. The whole country mourned for 7 days and held many solemn ceremonies. The old villain's ashes were scattered to the wind, while Princess Diem Kiyu's ashes were collected in a beautiful vase placed in a magnificent mausoleum built right where the princess died. The pain of the emperor losing his beloved daughter made him bedridden for a month. Not yet completely recovered, he called me and said, "Prince, listen to my orders. If you do not comply, it will be difficult to fulfill your destiny." I promise him that I will obey. And he continued to say, "Until now, we have always lived in complete happiness, never having been disturbed by any disaster. But when you came, the happiness I enjoyed was shattered. My daughter died, her teacher was no longer there, and only thanks to some miracle was I still alive. So you are the cause of all those misfortunes that I cannot calm down. So you should quietly leave this place, and go immediately out of my sight. If you stay here any longer, I won't be able to live because your presence will definitely only bring misfortune. That's all I want to say. Scat! And never appear in my country. No amount of respect can stop me from making you regret it." I wanted to explain a few sentences, but the king blocked my throat with words filled with anger, so I was forced to leave, far away from his kingdom. Hated, chased away and abandoned by everyone, I don't know what will happen next. Before leaving the city, I went to a bathhouse, shaved my beard, hair and eyebrows, and put on an ascetic's habit. I cried as I walked. I cried a little for my hardships, but I cried a lot for the deaths of the princesses Kiyu Diem that I caused. I passed through many countries without letting anyone recognize me, and finally I decided to go to the city of Baghdad in the hope of meeting the leader of the believers and arousing his sympathy for a story so terrible. Very strange. I just arrived here this afternoon and the first person I met was a fellow monk who had just told his story before me. You know the rest, ma'am, and why I have the honor of being present in your residence. When the second ascetic finished telling his story, Zobaydah told him, "Very well, you go, withdraw from here and go wherever you want, I give you permission." But instead of leaving the house, he begged the young woman to let him stay like the first monk, and he came and sat next to him. "But, Your Majesty," said Scheherazade, mention here, "the morning light has forced me to stop. I venture to be sure that no matter how good the second monk's story is, the third monk's story is no less. Then the king will compare if he is patient." The emperor was curious to know if the story he was about to tell was really as good as the one he had just told, so he stood up and decided to prolong Scheherazade's life even though the time limit he had given had already been many days. Then, at the end of the night, Dinarzade said to the queen, "My dear sister, if you don't sleep anymore, I would like to wait until dawn is not long. Tell me a story that's one of the good stories you know." I really want to hear." Shahryar also said the story of the third monk. "Your Majesty." Scheherazade said, "I will obey your orders." The third monk, she added, seeing that it was his turn to tell the story. He turned to Zobaydah and began his story as follows. Thank you for joining us for today's fairy tale. We hope these stories bring joy and meaning to your day. If you love our channel, please hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any exciting tales. Wishing you a good night and sweet dreams. See you in the next story.